Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for that introduction. Well done. It's a lot to get through. Appreciate y'all showing up, hopefully with full bellies. We'll get started here. I'm George, so I just want to welcome y'all to this panel. Excited to be here. I want to open it up first to either a statement or how your work has, addresses forestry and fish and wildlife.
As I said in the introduction, I'm a wildlife biologist. I teach here at Haywood Community College fish and wildlife management classes. I teach ornithology, wildlife botany, wildlife management techniques, wildlife management, ichthyology, fisheries techniques, aquatic and terrestrial ecology classes, GIS. I teach all the classes in wildlife, really. So that's my background. I primarily did my master's research on songbirds of the southern Appalachians, looking at responses to timber harvest and climate change through the University of Tennessee. So my specialty is birds, but I'm in all wildlife, and I'm really big into native habitat stuff. So.
Thanks. I'm David Henderson, and I teach philosophy at Western Carolina University, where I chair the philosophy and religion program and also help with the environmental science program. And I mostly write about what goes into how we value the wildlife, both individually and as a community. History of ideas like wilderness that have had a negative connotation as wasteland or a positive connotation as sacred space, or how they then get put into law in the Wilderness Act, and how we use those different values to manage the problems we actually have in the landscape. And I've been involved for the past little while with the Environmental Sustainability Board of the town of Waynesville, and that's been a great opportunity to try to have some direct impact on our local woods and wildlife. And I have, all three of my kids have been HEC Wolfpack, so it's good to be here.
So I'm Dr. Sarah Parsons, and thank y'all for the great introductions. So I do a lot of urban ecology work and a lot of work with insects. So it's not a big jump to go from insects to wildlife. So there's a lot of food webs that are really dependent on insects. And there are a lot of really important things that insects do, a lot of important ecosystem services they provide, pollination, nutrient cycling services. And so my work is looking in the urban space and how we can help conserve insects. Insect declines have been on the rise for many years now. You've probably seen some news stories about this. And urbanization is suspected to be contributing to those declines. So my work's looking at how can we design cities to conserve insects and thus also conserve all the critters that depend on insects, songbirds, you name it. So that's the connection for me. I also teach environmental science at Western Carolina. So I'm going to be wearing both hats today. So I'll put on my environmental science professor hat a couple times during the discussion, but then I'll also put on my entomologist hat. So just beware that I might pull a different hat out at any given time. But yeah, happy to be here. So.
Thanks, Sarah. I have a lot of questions about you because about the insects, I guess. Yeah. I'm really excited to be here, and I am Dr. Rao, research scientist with North Carolina Institute for Climate Studies. We have booths outside, and so we are an institute between NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and NC State University. So we are located in Asheville, which is the headquarters of the National Centers for Environmental Information, where the world's environmental data all come to spend their second career. When they were collected from the field or from satellites, that all came to Asheville and then being used to develop all those monitoring and different types of products that use in everyone's daily life, like the World Meteorological Organization just released the state of climate reports about the climate conditions for the entire globe in 2024. They use a lot of data from the data center in Asheville. And for myself, I am a climate scientist, and so a little bit oddball for this group. But when I started my college degree in stats, I was always very fascinated by the nature, so I joined a lot of student clubs on environmental conservation, especially the birding groups on campus. So that's where I found my passion, and then tried to combine my training in statistics and math to solve those environment problems. That's where I pursued my degree in geography for my PhD, specifically looking at how can we use those data from the satellite and from the measurements that we collect to monitoring the change of the environment, climate specifically, and how they impact on the ecosystems and the society. And I am also a birder, so I serve on the board of directors for the Blue Ridge Audubon chapter, which is a chapter of the National Audubon, and that serves the Western North Carolina. And if you haven't heard, the National Audubon put out a report called Survival by Degrees, that's specifically looking at how climate change affecting the bird species and the rate of extinction for them in this century. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Great, all right. So what do y'all see as the most significant needs in our community regarding our forests and wildlife?
Well, that's a big question. There's a lot. Just leaving space for wildlife, to me, is the most important thing. Having habitat for wildlife and understanding that word habitat is specific for every single individual species. So what is habitat for a song sparrow is not going to be habitat for a bald eagle. Or it may be, it just depends. Restoring native habitats is a big deal to me. Encouraging native plants, planting native plants. We talk a lot about climate change. I think climate change overshadows a lot of our issues. There's a lot more that we need to focus on, and honestly, climate change is this big scary thing, but if we tackle these smaller issues, they all build into climate change. I'm big on promoting native stuff, native species of wildlife, and to do that, you need to have native plants. So that's where I fall on a lot of things. That's a big issue to me right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of big, overwhelming problems, right? From insect decline to climate change. But I think our capacity to be good neighbors to our non-human neighbors requires first that we have a clue who they are and what their needs are. And so I think if I were to highlight a biggest need, it's for more people to get curious about our wildlife, to pay attention to learn it, whether that's through birding or citizen science apps or getting involved in projects. Because if nobody knows about it or cares about it, we can lose it without paying attention instantly. But if everybody, builds that relationship and that knowledge and pays attention and knows who their neighbors are, and what their needs are, then we have a much better shot about doing right by them.
Yeah, so to play off what you were saying, David, I think, just finding the space and nature that you care about and fighting for it. I have a book recommendation for you, My Green Manifesto by David Gessner. It's a really great book. It talks about environmentalism, where where we started the modern environmental movement to where we are today, and it's a lot different today. But he argues, finding those nature spaces that you're passionate about and fighting to protect them. And in urban ecology, this is a real struggle, right? Because in urban areas, folks are typically separated from nature. But there's actually a lot of nature within cities and a lot of biodiversity within cities. And so in my line of work, it's been a big thing for me to try to get people to see all that nature around them. But I think all of you here today have an interest in the environment. You probably have, that all probably started from a little space in your backyard or walking in the woods with your family. And so, I think the greatest need is to bring more people in on that, bring more people to those nature spaces, bring your friends to those nature spaces, go hiking, and fight for them. I think that's our biggest need right now, is to to keep caring and to be contagious with that caring, right? And to bring in others on that. Because we need all of you kind of all of us working together to really save those spaces that we love.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, when I totally agree is what you're saying about finding a space that you care about and fighting for them. And when I was in college, those student groups, there was a concept that we were adopting, which is called your secret garden. So finding a space that you really like and then go visit and observe the changes in those areas, right? That can be just a piece of grassland like in the back of your dorm, or that can be a city park that's close to your campus. And you can observe, especially if you pay attention, you can see a lot of those fascinating small things that we usually ignore in our busy daily lives. And if you pay attention to it throughout the time, you will see the change, right? Because of the phenology of different species will change because of climate change. And one of the examples I used to use when I was in DC area when I was doing my PhD is that if you try to track the cherry blossom peak dates, that you will see the date has been moving earlier and earlier because the temperature is getting warmer in the spring. So that's where that can actually have a lot of impact on the local economy, right? Because the local areas really serve the tourist people when they come into town to do the tourism stuff with the cherry blossom. I think the same thing for Western North Carolina. The fall foliage is a big attraction for the region, and climate can have a really big impact on those phenomena and also those volatility of those, especially when we have more extreme events like Hurricane Helene happens that can really disrupt both the ecosystem itself as well as the local economy, because that is one thing that local economy depends on. And one more thing I want to follow up on one thing Andrew mentioned is that climate change is a big scary thing, but that also has a lot of interconnection with things like biodiversity and habitats, and there's also the complex relation between them, because land use, land cover change both is contributor to the climate change as well as affecting the habitats. And so a lot of times when you're addressing some of the issues, they create co-benefits both for the climate mitigation and adaptation as well as for wildlife conservation in different ways, and also for society like the air quality. And there's all those what we call co-benefits is something that when you put all those complex topics in mind, you can find solutions that can benefit more than just one topic.
Great, so I'm gonna break moderator decorum and put a snippet in here. Kind of the theme with the answers here kind of made me think of something of, awareness outside of our natural resource professionals. We need to get the general public more aware. And it kind of reminded me of a thought I had during Caleb's presentation about traditional ecological knowledge. And so thinking about that in the context of indigenous communities, but also non-indigenous communities, how our ancestors interacted with nature and the environment and were observant, and they were, way more in tune with that. We've kind of lost that through the advancement of technology and things like that. So trying to get that traditional ecological knowledge back for everyone, which will bring more awareness. So that's my 2 cents there. Next thought or next question, what is the role of individuals in the local community in the conservation of our natural wildlife and habitats, and who should be leading the charge?
Well, our role as humans is as stewards of our natural resources, in my opinion at least. And we have such a great effect on everything. Every single thing that you do in your life has an effect on the world. It doesn't matter whether it's brushing your teeth in the morning, driving your car to work, or making sure you get your trash in the trash bin. Every little thing that you do has an effect. So just keeping in mind in your day-to-day life, making little choices add up to bigger choices, to bigger changes. Trying to do the right thing as much as you can. If you got a piece of paper, throw it in the recycling bin instead of the trash can if you can. Keeping those little things in mind are big for most everyday people. If we can all do something, we're going to be making headway. But beyond that, educate yourself. Learn as much as you can about natural resources, about wildlife, in particular from my point of view. It's a lifelong thing. You can't learn everything about nature, unfortunately, or fortunately. It's what makes this career path special, in my opinion, and always interesting, because you can never learn it all. There's just always something new to learn. And so just keep learning, keep paying attention, and yeah, make little changes where you can, and when you get the opportunity, make the big changes and do the big things. So.
Yeah, I want to try and answer this on a couple of levels. Going way back even to the late Middle Ages, we have this idea in our Western law that the atmosphere and the waters and the wildlife are a commons. Everybody has a stake in them and nobody gets to own them. And that therefore the government has an obligation, what we call a public trust, right? That one of the fundamental reasons for the law is to hold in public trust these things that belong to everybody, right? And manage them. And when we move to like contemporary American, at least democratic ideals of government by the people, for the people, of the people, that means that public trust of wildlife is by the people, for the people, of the people, maybe also for the wildlife. This is a major reason to go like engage in your community, show up at town meetings, speak out at a school board thing, show up at something, is to stand up and take your place, or as a citizen holding in public trust for your neighbors and for future generations, right? The stewardship, as he says, of the biotic community. Now, I don't have a whole lot of say over whether in fact the public trust is being held well at big governmental levels. But you do actually, it's not that hard to have a lot of say at the local level, right? It's not that hard to have an impact in your town meeting, in your county meeting, right? To get on an advisory board for Waynesville or something like that, to go and have that. And the other level I want to answer it as, though, is so you're not only a political creature, you like have a habitat. You probably, some of you have a yard even. And making a corner of your yard wild and not spraying insecticides, things like that, can have huge impacts, especially if lots of us are doing it, on a lot of these things, right? For centuries before contact between Europe and the Americas, purple martins migrate down to South America, migrate back up here, and east of the Mississippi at least, only nest in housing provided by people. We have these old relationships with other species that we can keep up, right? And that's not like a policy thing, that's like are you gonna keep up and be a good neighbor with these other species that we've got these relationships with, right? And a lot of that is actually in your power.
Yeah, so I warned you I'd put my environmental science professor hat on, so here I go. I want to argue that now's the prime time to get involved at the community level, at the local government level. As it may not be news to any of you, we're kind of in an interesting political kind of climate now. And when I teach environmental science, I usually kind of walk students through environmental policies through the ages. And so there's I'll argue three big environmental acts that were implemented in the early 70s, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, and the Endangered Species Act, that have really kind of formed the foundation of environmental law. And those acts are really important. And when I teach this in my classroom, I talk to students at Western, and their grandparents remember the Pigeon River that's near the Canton paper mill. They remember, and maybe some of you remember, that river wasn't clear before the 70s. It had some color to it. And this was a time before the 70s we had rivers, setting on fire because there were so many chemicals in it. Clean Water Act comes around, really cleans up our rivers, and these have been really, really important pieces of legislation. And those pieces of legislation, over time, have ebbed and flowed in terms of administration changes. It's just kind of the natural way of it. The executive branch, executes those laws, and so they might might differently execute those laws depending on who's in charge, and that's natural ebbs and flows of our political system. Right now, we're kind of in a big ebb, I'd say, because we have a lot of resources that have been taken away for folks that are trying to uphold Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act. A lot of the folks involved in those, trying to keep our waterways clean and our air clean. There's been a lot of resources that have been taken away to allow them to do that. So that's kind of the current state where we're at. But even before administration changes, at the Supreme Court level a few years ago, there were some major changes to Clean Water Act, some big ones to Clean Air Act, and also some bigger ones kind of to just environmental law in general. And so we're just in a very different political landscape. And I promise this is all going back to say that now's more important time than ever to get involved at the local level, because kind of at the federal and state level, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And so now's a really important time for you to really, that stream that you love, catching crawdads in your backyard, like it's really important for you to be monitoring that stream and looking at making sure you're protecting those spaces that you love, because it's really important for us at the community level, at local government level, to really step up now with a lot of these uncertainties happening around us. So I just want to empower you guys to do that, and I think it's an important time to protect your spaces, right? So I'll leave it at that and pass it.
Thanks. I'm going to follow up on what Sarah was saying, because a lot of times when we're talking about policy, it's not made through overnight, right? It's a long process. Oftentimes can take 10 years or longer to really make those policies become some reality. So the persistence is important. At the same time, I'm going to use the two words. One is educate, one is participate. The educate is like trying to provide awareness for different groups and to provide those backgrounds on why those topics are important. And when I was working with some conservation groups back in China, they have been engaged with some of the community members from Taiwan, and then the concept of that specific community group is that they specifically focus on education, especially next generation, because they believe the next generation or the students in the room are the agent of change that can drive a lot of changes, both when they become into a position that can make decisions, as well as they can influence the decision of their parents and their family members. So education about those topics, even in school, as well as those community members, as well as different types of groups within society, is really important to drive those changes that at the larger scales. And the other one is participate, where, like many panelists mentioned, the nature system is really complex. There are a lot of things we still don't know. And so there are a lot of great opportunities for everyone to participate as citizen scientists, like the iNaturalist, the eBird, and all those different programs. So if you are into birds, and then you can participate in those Christmas bird counts every year, trying to capture the population dynamics of the species in your backyard, right? And in the region, as well as with NOAA or with the weather and climate side, you can set up what we call COCORAS, like a rain gauge that in your backyard, that we can collect more rain data, rainfall data for us to make better monitoring as well as forecasting for understand how those environment has changed, that can be further used to enhance our way to predict how the future might be and then understand how that's affecting our community. So that is things that everyone can participate. You're contributing to science that can lead to the change as well as the policy making as well.
Great points. Moving on, how have Hurricane Helene and changes in the federal government affected these issues here in Western North Carolina?
Well, this is also a big question, and we could probably break both of those into their separate questions. But starting with Hurricane Helene, obviously that affected us directly here. But it's important to remember that big storm events are normal. 100-year, 50-year storm events are normal. What's changed is we don't have the vegetation on stream banks like we used to, because we develop all the way to the stream bank, we mow to the stream bank. There's garbage that washed down the stream and into places. Many of our animal and some of our plant populations were already at lower levels than we'd like them to be. So big events like that can have big effects on those animals that were already declining. The good news is that nature heals. The streams will heal. Things will come back. But hopefully we take from this that we need more, again, native ecosystems, keeping plants on, woody plants on the stream banks, stabilizing our streams, focusing on that kind of stuff. Stream health, water quality health, I think is going to be a good thing that comes out of Helene, I hope, just to make people more aware of that you might live up on a hill in Nashville, but your house could still flood. We do have huge flood events from time to time. And then as far as the changes in the federal government, that's something that's very stressful for wildlifers and foresters, I think, particularly. You've probably seen a lot in the news about that. But the good news is that we're all still here. Many of us are still working towards this. We're not going to stop. We're not going to give up. We're going to still persist. The environment's still going to be here. Humans will still need clean air, clean food, clean water, clean soils. And so no matter what changes take place federally, we will still, many of us will still be pushing for that and working towards that. And also understand that there are state agencies out there that do often way more work than the feds when it comes to natural resources management. They often have more responsibility towards that. The feds are big. They're coordinating. They're between the states. There's things that the feds do really well that the states don't do really well. But when it comes to wildlife management, in my personal opinion, nobody does it better than our state agencies. Most state agencies, at least. There are some we could debate that on, but the North Carolina Wildlife Commission is a great agency. The Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency is a great agency. Georgia Department of Natural Resources, so our neighboring states, they do great work with wildlife as well. So from a wildlife perspective, we're going to be okay, but it is hard to see, so many friends and loved ones lose their jobs and struggle through that. But our nature is resilient. Our natural systems are resilient, and they will come back. It's a question of whether we're going to be here when that comes. If we will disappear, and some nature might disappear, but the world's going to be okay. It's just how much do we want to suffer before, through climate change or trash or whatever we do to the planet is the real thing to me.
Thanks. I think I want to emphasize the legacy of public lands and public science that have been part of the American democracy for a long time and part of how we work out and practice that democracy. We can't make good decisions together without good information. We needed to make public health decisions. We needed science about tobacco that wasn't funded by the tobacco manufacturers, that had a sort of neutral bias. And when it comes to science about climate change, we need a source of information on this that has a funding that's independent of the industries that are dependent on, those emissions, et cetera. So our ability to manage the public trust of wildlife and atmosphere and water depends on really good understanding of those things. And we have built up over generations these institutions of public science that are for the public good. It doesn't get patented, the information goes out and is available for everybody, and this goes back to even like the beginning of the county extension offices and all kinds of things, the idea that part of what the government can do is make science available to the people, right, to empower them to do that. And part of what we're seeing right now in the changes is an attempt to walk back a whole bunch of that, to stop trusting that that's really neutral or fair play and pull back. And I think we really need to defend and lean into, and it'll be a lot of work to rebuild, right, our capacity for public science. But public lands then seem much closer to home, especially here. We're at one of the biggest concentrations of public lands anywhere in the East, right, here in North Carolina. And there's a lot of thinkers between the world wars when we were building out and growing a lot of our public lands who thought that having public lands was an important sort of training place for democracy. It gave us something that we all cared about, and we had to get together and argue about how to work it out on a local and a regional level, and that would help us build the capacities to handle bigger problems at national level with this kind of democracy. And it's also an important part of your the quality of life living in an area, right? There's a freedom that comes from having trails that can go hike and things, right? Because we have these public lands. So as there's also pushback to sort of retreat from public lands and having public lands and put those towards private economic business uses to grow the economy, that's giving up on some big part of the better parts of our American heritage here, I think. That, that's a place that you can engage and lean in on. And of course, especially right now when a whole lot of public lands got radically reshaped by Hurricane Helene here, right? There's a lot of work to do in figuring out what to do about that and how to respond and what to restore and what to just let heal and what to do those things. So it's a tough time to be losing some of the resources to do that.
Actually, I'm sorry, 1 second, piggyback off of that. The public lands thing, it's so important that everyone in here understands that that's your land. That's your land. It's literally every single one of us in here's land. If it goes to private, if it gets privatized, it's no longer yours. It's not yours. You let somebody else take it. So that's a really bad idea for us to sell off our public land. So I just want to piggyback on what he's saying. That we need these public lands. They're very important. And they're yours. They're mine. They're his. They're hers. They're all of ours. We own them. Let's not give them away, please.
So do we have a hard stop at 1:15? I saw the...
I don't know how hard the stop is.
Yeah, if you do have a couple more questions, that's fine,
I
but
think you should answer.
Yeah, go.
Oh, well, I think I'll defer. I'll
Okay.
skip this one and just, to save time.
Just quick comments. I think it's also a great opportunity for us to rethink how we rebuild up for the region, right? Especially after Helene in the western part of the states, and a lot of towns are destroyed. It's sad to see that, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity for those regions affected to build back in a more resilient sense, in a way that think about all those old infrastructure that has been destroyed. When we're rebuilding them back up, how can we make sure that they can sustain the future change based on the science support of decision making, right? City of Asheville has a North Fork, because I live in Asheville, so everyone's talking about North Fork Reservoir with that, and if it's not because of the upgrade of the North Fork Reservoir completed about 2 years ago, the flooding can be much worse, because in the upgrade of the reservoir, they accounted for a much more extreme precipitation situations. So I think that is something when, as a community, we build up together, build back up together for the region. We need to think about what the future may look like. How can we design those rebuild plans more resilient in those future conditions, both for our human environment as well as for the wildlife and in those conditions.
So we're right on time. At the risk of taking it over, I want to thank David and Andrew for their comments on public land, because it's a huge part. I echo those same sentiments. It's a huge part of our American identity, and the benefits that we all get from our public lands is almost can't quantify it. So we need to be cognizant of the status of our public lands and keep them public. So try to keep this short, we're over. Last question, of course, it's another loaded question. If the audience walks away from this panel with just one idea or one corrected misconception, what would you like that to be?
I go back to what Caleb was talking about this morning, that you are a part of nature, not apart from nature. We are part of the ecosystem. We are the top predator in the ecosystem, and that's okay to be the top predator in the ecosystem. But we are in the ecosystem, so don't think of yourself as apart from it, but as a part of it.
I think we're about midway up the food web. I don't
That's
think we're,
probably true.
Grizzly bears might
but
be
yeah,
considered
you're part of the carbon
tigers.
cycle, you're part of the nitrogen cycle, you're part of the water cycle, like, right, all of this, this is about you.
Yeah, I would just say keep caring and have hope. I know a lot of us might be feeling a little down right now with kind of the current state of the world, but you know, you can make a difference. Keep protecting your little piece of earth. Keep caring. Bring in your friends to go out into nature with you too, and just get more folks caring and have hope.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to climate angle where understand your risk. And I think the misconception of climate haven for Asheville is something that we all understand now, that what happens is so every place in the world has their own risk in the context of climate. Understand what the risks for your place are and then prepare for those potential risks. That will really significantly limit the damage or increase your resiliency in the future. So think about whether it's flooding or fire, and fire is a big risk right now for this part of the state because the damage of the forest and then leads to a lot of fuel that on the ground, and think about what that may mean for your own place as well for the region as something in the short term you need to think about.
Appreciate y'all coming in. So appreciate y'all sitting in on this. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions.